Hey everybody, and welcome to another Chairman of the Board ranking video. This is where I take a look at the last 5 new to me board games that I've played and I rank and review them in order of preference. Now, some of the games today are not so well known, so hopefully there's something interesting here for you. But before I get started on the games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, Keyenda.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer. And if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. At number 5, I have Würfel Bohnanza. So I was completely misled about what this game would be. I was thinking it was a variant on the classic Bonanza by Uwe Rosenberg, one of the most popular card games of all time. This one could not be more different mechanically from the original Bonanza, because this one is a dice-driven game, and it's a very light one that is definitely reminiscent of a game like Yahtzee, where you're trying to roll symbols on these unique dice, trying to reach these different criteria on these cards, to climb up each of those criteria to try and start generating points. And it's going to be a race to get a number of those cards complete. The higher you go up on those tracks, it means you get more, basically more points faster. But of course, the likelihood and probability of rolling those particular configurations get more difficult. Now, the thing that makes this game different to a lot of the other Yahtzee style games, and there are a lot of them, is the fact that when it is your turn and you're rolling the dice that you roll can actually assist the other players climb up on their tracks. Because, as I said, for each roll that you do, if their next criteria is met, then they'll creep up those tracks, meaning that you're engaged when it's not your turn and you're passively involved in the game. Now, when you are the active player, those individual rolls don't really matter. It's only the ones that you end up banking. Again, in that classic Yahtzee system, roll the dice, you have to keep at least one back, and then you can keep going. And that's pretty much what the game entails. As I said, you can go right to the top if you like, getting those really difficult ones to get more points, or you can kind of bail out a little bit earlier if you're having particular trouble rolling a particular formation, and move on to the next card. And that's pretty much what the game entails. It's very straightforward stuff, but I do like that additional twist. It's kind of like a Yahtzee or style game variant on something like Machikoro or My Farm Shop, Bad Company. Again, when you're getting rewards when it's not your turn, and I really do like that additional touch. It's pretty fast. I think the box actually overstates how long the game is. It only takes around maybe 20-30 minutes to play this one, and it's fun. You do have to kind of switch your brain off and just go with the flow and roll with the punches. And I suppose one of the mainest deficits of this game is that it does have so much stiff competition out there. For example, I do have games like Age of War in my collection, games like Medici the dice game, which I do think slightly have the edge mechanically. But again, I do like that additional touch of being involved when it's not your turn. So that is Würfel Bohnanza, a pleasant game at number 5. At number 4, I have Animalia. So this is a set collection game where you're trying to collect cards of particular animals. And the method you do that is pretty interesting, as when you are the active player, you will reveal a card. You will choose to keep that card for yourself, or you will pass on it and it will move on to the next player in player order. And again, they will choose to take it or move on. If it gets back to you, you can add another card to the mix, where that process will repeat and repeat until that somebody will eventually take them, keep them in front of them for the scoring, and it will move on to the next player to take their turn, where they'll repeat that process. Now, the idea of this game is you are trying to get duplicates of the same animal type, because if you do get more than one of a certain animal by the end of the round, then you will start generating these kind of gold medals, which will give you victory points. And by the end game, after only 3 rounds, so it's a lightning fast game, only looking around 15 to 20 minutes to play this one. At the end of the game, for each set of different animals you'll get some bonus points, but also if you have 5 of the same animal medals, then you'll get some additional points too. Now, there is an additional restriction that is very important in the game, which is the fact that you can only ever have 5 cards in front of you. So this game actually directly reminded me of a game like Medici, when you have to pace yourself quite carefully because otherwise you might be forced to take a certain amount of cards that you're not necessarily interested in. So sometimes it is worth bailing out early just to keep your options open. But again, you don't want to bail out too early, otherwise you'll be completely at the mercy of top decking the cards if everybody else has filled up their supply too. Now, not only are you looking at the animal types for those victory points, you also have to consider that you have these kind of star system at the top of these cards, and if you end up having the most of those stars at the end of the round, then you have a bit more autonomy to draw more cards off the top of the deck and mess around with your configuration of animals to hopefully get you more victory points. And additionally, there are 3 different kind of special powers that can come into play if you end up getting a pair of those certain types of animals. So for example, some might say you can, I think, snatch a card off of another player or get rid of cards and things. I can't remember exactly what they do, but there's a little bit of take that and a little bit more kind of tomfoolery that is added into the game. So that's pretty much it. It's super simple stuff, but I do like that additional restriction of only having 5 cards or 5 card spaces in front of you. It adds that little bit more interest to the game. And for a micro game that takes, again, only 15, 20 minutes to play, I think this one does quite a good job of it, and it does feel slightly different to some of its competition. So I can see this one growing. I don't think the decision space is terribly high, but again, it's fast enough that really not to bother me too much. And again, you can just enjoy the process and hopefully it will work out for you by the end of the game. So that is Animalia. And something I should mention as well is the art style is actually pretty funky and I quite like it. Quite funny looking animals, they're really in your face and zany looking. So that is Animalia at number 4. At number 3, I have Shitenno. Now this is a Euro-style area control game that definitely focuses less on combat than some of its competition. It's more of a cerebral card drafting style game that actually uses the I split you choose mechanism in quite a novel way, one that I've not really seen before, being used in an area control game. This one, you are of course trying to control these different regions by having the most of your markers there. Whenever you place a new control marker there, you'll get some bonuses, but also at the end of the game, if you have the majority of your markers in these regions, you'll get some additional points. Now, the way you control the regions is actually pretty fascinating, and I was hoping the game might be a little bit more fun and exciting than it sounded to me on paper. I thought this game maybe was a little bit drier in practice than I would have liked it to be, but I'll talk about how the mechanisms work and I'll talk about why maybe they didn't work for me as much as I would have hoped for. So basically at the start of the round, the first player, I think, takes all of these cards that will give you, they're basically your currency to try and control the different regions, and you'll divide them up as you see fit. And once you've kind of created one lot of cards, you'll submit them to the other players, but it will go in player order. And player order in this game is a really important factor because the priority is so important. And also each kind of player initiative value will come with a unique ability or unique power that comes with it, which are minor, but can be quite important. So again, as the kind of first player, you'll submit these cards to the next player, and they can either choose to take those cards for themselves or reject them, which will go down to the next player in turn order. And that process will repeat until it gets back to, well, if everybody's passed, the first player will be forced to keep those cards that they've submitted. So you can't really be too tight with what you're offering because those cards are just going to make it back to you. But being too generous means that those cards, you're not going to see them at all. And these cards are things such as these warrior cards, which are like ninjas and samurais, which are your criteria to donate towards controlling those different regions. Some regions might say you need 3 ninjas and a daimyo to control this particular region, and so on. So again, you are collecting these cards to try and build up these sets to donate them to control these regions. That's really cool to be on paper. I really like that idea, and that's pretty much what the game entails. It's a repeating process of that again and again until the board fills up. But there were some kind of hidden issues that became more transparent the more I was playing this one. Number one, there is quite a strong potential for kingmaking in this one. If things aren't going your way, maybe you don't want another certain player to win, you could easily mess with the turn order and submit cards that the next player is going to take. That didn't happen, of course, if you're playing in the right spirit. That's probably not going to happen, but it is a factor, and it definitely can become apparent when you are playing this one. And another one, I think that the player order is a little bit too important, and I say that because if you are the fourth player, you are pretty much at the mercy of the other ones, because the criteria in which you're donating, these cards changes. Some of them are built onto the board, but some of them change with each donation, so that you can really be building up towards something just for it to be swept out from under your feet when it's your turn. Yes, you can say, well, you shouldn't have taken that turn order, and that might be true. Sometimes you don't really have the choice. Another thing is that I think the game is a little bit too rinse and repeat, a little bit too repetitive, and it could have done with a side mechanism or two just to make it a little bit more dynamic. I think the strategy in this game is a little bit one note, where you're basically trying to get duplicates of the same one. Generally speaking, duplicates would be better, because you can go to the same region again and again. But still, I might be ragging on this game. I thought the concept was really cool. It worked well, and I'm glad I've played it. But there was just those little niggles and little grinding halts that came with the game, and just brought it down a bit for me for it to be a true great or a keeper. But I think the framework and the skeleton of the game is solid, and I think if they came out with a second edition, that'd be definitely something I'd be wanting to try. Looks really nice with this vintage Detroit artwork. Has a nice kind of classic Euro feel with that Detroit artwork. It's a nice little mix. And yeah, I enjoyed playing it, but my incentive to go back and play it is next to nothing, sadly. And I think this is one of those games that is going to fade into obscurity, and it has faded into obscurity because it just lacks that certain X factor that is Shitenno at number 3. At number 2, I have Zooscape. This is another set collection card game where you are building up sets of animals which will score points in different ways, and they all generally have limitations on how many of them you can keep before they start generating you negative points. And the balancing of the points reflects that. So for example, you can have like these birds which are worth very few points, but you can have loads of them, or the elephants which are worth a ton of points, but you can only ever have one of them. Okay, if you take another one, you're going to be generating negative points. The way the game works is based on an I split you choose mechanism, which again is a mechanism I don't really see much of, so it's nice to play more of these games. And at the start of the round, the first player is going to lay out a bunch of cards in a fixed order, and you can't mix them around. And then you're going to be placing this kind of divider card somewhere in that line to basically split this row of cards into 2 groups. Now, once the groups have been determined, each player is going to choose which group that they want in a kind of blind bidding system. Do you want the left lot? Do you want the right lot? Now, once everybody has revealed, if you are the only player to choose one of those lots, then you'll grab all those cards and put them in front of you, which again will be animals. There might be negative points. They might let you shed some animals and so on to keep under those limits. But if you are the players, or if more than one player selects a certain group, then that will be subdivided into future groups, which again will hopefully eventually sort itself out. Now, there is an additional mechanism that I thought was really cool, where if nobody takes a particular group, then all of those cards are put under this kind of ring binder into this folder, and that will be a kind of a single entity in that row. So again, with a single selection, you can take all of those cards, which is quite cool. And if nobody ends up taking anything by the end of the game or the end of the round, you'll take some kind of consolation points as well. So I do generally like blind bidding systems, especially when they're not zero sum. I tend to get a bit more frustrated with these styles of games if more than one person goes to the same thing again and again. They get nothing, and then the kind of third player or the third wheel will end up getting points and just take a massive jump on the other players through no real thought process. This one does a really good job of compensating for that, because again, the consequences of your actions really do shine through here, and that incentive is constantly changing on which group you might want. And of course, if you are monitoring what the other players do, you might be wanting to divide this just so that you get a great bunch of cards, and you know that a couple of those cards you can take, but the other players cannot afford to take. And that's another thing I generally like in these styles of games, is when you just have to pitch your offer just right to try and disincentivize someone from doing what they want to do. And this game does that really well. Another game that's lightning fast. You are only looking at around 20 to 30 minutes to play this one, and it's just a pleasant game really. So I can see this one growing for me. I've only played it once or twice up to this point. And again, this one could be a grower. I think that the art style is a little bit lacking. I don't like the look of the game, which is weird really, because it's kind of this watercolor animals. On paper that sounds nice. I think it looks a little bit jarring, and some of the artwork is a little bit off. But the gameplay is solid. You know, it's a solid designer, and yeah, I enjoyed it, and I can see this one sticking around. So that is Zooscape at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth. Now, if you're not aware of what this game is, this is the re-implemented version of Seven Wonders Duel, which is one of my favourite two-player games of all time. So I was coming into this game pretty much expecting to love it, because not only do I love Seven Wonders Duel, I'm a huge Tolkien fan as well. So this one I would say is maybe 80% the same as the original Seven Wonders Duel. Some people may disagree with that, but that's the way I feel. The card system, or the card drafting system, is identical, which is not a bad thing, because this is a brilliant drafting system where you are displaying these cards out in a fixed order, some face up, some face down, and on your turn you can draft the cards at the extremities, potentially revealing cards beneath it, which are now available to your opponent. So there's this good kind of opportunity creating system that goes on, which creates a real natural tension throughout the game. So love that drafting system. It's still implemented perfectly here, and I'm just baffled why this mechanism is not used more in other games. Now, this game differs from Seven Wonders Duel mainly because it completely does away with the victory point system. So there's no longer any way to win by victory points. You are winning kind of in one of 3 different ways generally. The first of which is to collect the favour of the different Middle-earth races. So you've got the hobbits, the wizards, the elves, and so on. And that works exactly the same as the science systems in the original Seven Wonders Duel, where you're just trying to collect, I believe, 6 or 7 of them, and you'll instantly win if you get those. The second method is much like the military track in the original Seven Wonders Duel, but this one, instead of kind of going back and forth on a tug of war, it's more of a chasing system where, of course, one player, the Fellowship, is controlling Sam and Frodo running along this track, and the other players is the Nazgul slowly gaining ground on those hobbits to try and catch them. Of course, if the hobbits get to Mount Doom, they'll win, and if the Nazgul, the Ringwraiths, get to Frodo and Sam, then they'll instantly win. But I must say this game does a fantastic job of visualising that chase with this really cool kind of perspex slider, where the hobbits are running, but the Nazgul is slowly gaining on it. It just looks really cool, a really nice little gimmick to visualise how that chase is playing out. Now, the biggest difference of this game is the fact that the third way that you can win this game is this kind of mini board to the side where you are competing over these 7 different regions of Middle-earth by having presence there. And if you have presence, either your soldiers or your orcs or goblins in those 7 regions, then you'll instantly win the game too. And of course, that means that there's this new type of card in the game where if you take them, you can deploy troops onto that map and then slide them around to try and fight each other. Now, the combat in this game is as easy as it gets, or easy as you can imagine, where basically troops cancel each other out. So if you have 2 troops here and somebody spawns a new troop into that region, they'll kill each other, meaning there's only 1 troop left. There's also some ability to slide around this map later in the game by moving your troops around. This game also does away with the wonders from Seven Wonders Duel, so you no longer have your personal display of cards, the powerful cards that need a lot of resources to play. This one you have these landmarks, which are available to both of the players. They're very resource intensive, but if you get there, then you can put permanent presence down on the map, which is obviously gives you a nice advantage for controlling those different regions without having the need for any troops there. So that's the kind of main differences between the two, at least mechanically. This game did away with some other things as well to make it a bit faster, a bit punchier, and a bit more streamlined, and particularly when it comes to the resource management. So this one For every resource that you cannot afford to pay for when you're taking a new card, you can simply substitute that with a coin rather than a slightly more convoluted variant on the original game. I must say, although on paper I think this game sounds like a better resolution for that, I think it did away with some of the foreplanning with what resources you might need, because it always seemed a little bit too easy to afford everything. So I thought that was a little bit of a weakness as compared to the original. Again, I thought it was a bit too easy to buy what you want when you want, and you weren't punished too much for not taking the resource cards early. But in contrast to that criticism, I think this game does a better job of increasing the tension from the get-go. It really does seem like as soon as you start this game, if you're starting to deploy troops on the map, it feels like the game could be ended really quickly if you're not careful. So this game does a really good job of throwing you straight into the frying pan, really, and you have to be looking over your shoulder and be paranoid straight from the get-go. Rather than, it was a bit more, I'm not going to say relaxed, but you could take your foot off the gas a little bit more with the original, because you wouldn't have to worry about those science symbols or the war, maybe until at least the second or halfway through the second phase. This one, it feels like getting straight into the action from the start, which I thought was a really nice touch. Other than that, I think the area control thing was a novel concept, a good idea. I thought it was a little bit rigid and a little bit too frustrating at times, because it felt like it was a little bit too back and forth. Deploy troops, take them off. Deploy troops, take them off. It felt like he wasn't really progressing and getting anywhere, at least if you weren't putting those towers down. And I also thought the fact that this game can go to the end, and now of course you don't have the victory point system anymore, it simply comes down to who has the most coverage on that area control map. And that can feel a little bit anticlimactic if you do manage to, again, weather the storm and get right to the end. You no longer are rewarded for your efforts. It simply comes down to who was controlling the most of the map, which can sometimes just feel circumstantial. And again, it doesn't feel like it has the punch of the original, where if you invested heavily in those victory points, then you were rewarded for that. And maybe that's the Eurogamer in me. I like victory points, and that game did that side of things a little bit better for me. So to summarise, I think this is a really nice reworking of the game, of course, especially if you like Lord of the Rings. The art style in this game is lovely. It is vintage to trade artwork. It looks fantastic, albeit I don't think it really looks like Tolkien-style artwork. It's a little bit too, I'm not going to say comic booky, but Detroit has a very distinct style, whereas Tolkien art generally has this kind of whimsical, more kind of ethereal style that I think works and fits the IP a bit better for me. But again, that's because I'm a fan of the books and fan of Tolkien lore in general. Maybe as a more casual gamer, you wouldn't really understand, or not understand, but grok that. But still, if I didn't have the original Seven Wonders, I would certainly add this one to my collection. I think for me personally, I slightly prefer the original because I do like the victory point system. I prefer the progress tokens in the original one as well. And I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of game length and a few more fiddly rules to compensate for that. So I think you're going to fall in one or two camps. If you like one, you're going to like the other. It's just a matter of which one you prefer. Do you want the fantasy theme? Do you want the more ancient world theme? It's completely up to you. They're both great games. Do I think both of them warrant a place in the collection? I don't think so. Again, I think I'm in the minority when I say that. I've heard a lot of people say that there's definitely space for both of them in your collection. I disagree. I think they're too similar to have both of them. But still, you can't really go wrong. They're both great games. And the price point, the artwork, the mechanisms, it's just a really good value product for this latest Lord of the Rings version. So that is Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle-earth at number 1. So there we have it. That concludes the video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel. For everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.